Hello, everyone. In today's episode, we're talking taxes and what you should be thinking about when it comes to your taxes. We're so excited to have here with us Lisa Isom, the CEO and founder of the Minerva Group. Lisa's journey began in 1994 when she started a home based accounting business to be more available for her three children. Fast forward to 2011, she officially launched the Minerva Group. Under Lisa's leadership, the Minerva Group has grown from a small firm with a handful of clients to a thriving business helping companies at all levels of their financial health. Their services range from bookkeeping and tax preparation to strategic financial advising. In addition to tax tips, we'll talk about Lisa's challenges as an entrepreneur and mother and the advice she gives to other women. We're so lucky to have Lisa here today to share her remarkable journey and the incredible work she does. She's my shero. Please welcome Lisa Isom to the show. Hello, Lisa.
Hey, Betty. Thanks for having me. It is truly an honor. I'm not just saying that. You are one of my favorite people, and I'm not just saying that either.
I pay her. I pay her to say that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know that the Minerva Group, the name has a special meaning. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I was looking to officially give my company a name, I really didn't want something that was my name, my last name, anything that's traditional. Being a woman that started an accounting firm in the 90s, that alone was a big jump. That still can come up as an issue. And so I wanted something that was just had a bigger meaning to me, but then also gave a little mystery to what we are and who and what we do. So my uncle, when I was a small child, he called me Minerva. And as a small child, I thought it was hideous and I hated it. And then one day, I found out that she is the Roman version of Athena, who is a powerful, goddess of wisdom. And it just resonated with me that, going out and doing something that was non-traditional for women, that it should have a powerful name that is about a woman. So that's where we got the Minerva Group.
Love that. So, were you just a super smart, precocious child? Could he just see the strength in you already? I mean, that's sort of crazy.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually that that was his meaning. He was a huge jazz person, like loved all kinds of different jazz artists and had a gigantic collection of jazz. My brother's nickname was Arbuckle. And so my brother's version of it is that both Arbuckle and Minerva were famous jazz people. I'm going with that I was just super
Yes, you
precocious
were
and
super sagacious. Yeah, that was,
yeah.
I don't know where that word came from. Yeah, I mean, most people have nicknames like Button or Sugarbug.
Cookie, like cute names.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right.
Not
But
some
Minerva is
weird name.
pretty, yeah, hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah, what brought you to accounting? It is a very male dominated. I don't know if it's so much so, but it's very much like now I work with women in tech or even in the financial services industry, it's still predominantly male. Is that the same for accounting for you?
Actually, it really is. But when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Like, I loved that. I thought I'd be a geneticist because I'm fascinated with genetics, but also like the people aspect of that. So to me, it was marrying like a couple of my skills with my interests. But back then, you had to go to MIT really to become a geneticist. And I realized quite quickly that it wasn't meeting the rest of my goals when I wanted to have children, when I wanted to, just move on with my life. Also, super expensive. And I wasn't sure that well, I'm quite sure I'm not MIT material. So, with
Oh,
all of those things against me, I was like,
yeah.
well, maybe I should regroup. So, I came back to Denver and was working at the Women's Center at Red Rocks Community College. Part time, going to college part time or full time, and I heard about a job opening at a CPA firm. So I thought, what the heck? I went, applied. He had me do a test. I told him I know nothing about accounting, and frankly, did not think accountants were very exciting. So the thought of working with them was not like, woohoo, I'm going to go work in a CPA firm. It was like, oh, I can get through this. Yeah, I can do anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, got in there, took the test, failed it miserably, but I asked him questions about it. And for some reason, he decided to hire me. Found I had an amazing knack for numbers and just, how it all worked within the new emerging computer side of accounting. And he paid for classes for me to go to school down at CU Denver. And really, that's where it all started, was falling
Wow.
into it.
That's, yeah, that is quite the journey.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. From geneticist to accountant to business
Uh-huh.
owner. Well, why did you decide? Well, it sounds like you started your home-based business again to because you had three kids, and were you just working too many hours at the firm that you started?
Yeah. So the firm I started at, we had been working, during tax season, 6 days a week, sometimes 7, 12, 14, 16-hour days. I would bring a loaf of bread, a pound of roast beef, because we only had a teeny tiny fridge, and some, condiments. And that is really what I ate lunch and dinner day after day after day. And then I found myself pregnant, and my daughter was due in January, which is an accountant's nightmare. That is our worst time, starting mid-January. Her birthday's January 12th, so she just nailed it as far as timing wise. And I just went to my boss and said, I can't do these hours with a newborn. And he said, well, we need you to do these hours, even if you have a newborn. So that's when I was young enough to not really think about consequences or how this would work. I started the business, and he gave me about 5 hours a month worth of business because they really did not like going out and training clients and installing software and doing all those things, which was the highlight of the job for me. So I was able to peel off that teeny bit, and then just hit the streets talking to people I knew, to clients that he said, oh gosh, I think you could do a little more for them. And that's how it started.
Wow. And all with the newborn.
Yes, all with a newborn. And then 3.5 years later, had my son, and then gave myself a nice little break before I had my youngest, who is 11 years younger than his sister.
Wow. Well, I mean, I still think it's a shame that we have to ask this question, how did you do it with three kids? But I do think it's super relevant. I mean, you and I have talked about this with being mothers, we have the guilt. And I'm not saying that men don't, but especially at the time that you were having children, men weren't partners as much as maybe they are
Yeah.
now, right? How did you do that? Were you going on client calls with your baby attached to you? I mean, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, and absolutely, that's what I was doing. I was back working a few days after giving birth, which had its own challenges, but
Yeah.
worked with my personality. Both of my older kids went to clients in baby carriers and slept at clients' offices, and it did all that for about 6 months. Luckily, I had amazing parents that helped out and made it easier. And then I became a single mom when my youngest was just about 2 years old. So one time I had a kid in each school that I was taxing around. So
Oh my
it was
gosh.
super challenging getting up early in the morning, then getting kids ready, getting them out the door, taxing them, and then working in between. So I felt like, sometimes I was up until 2 in the morning working. Um, and my kids are really well trained. I mean, I can still give them a little finger up and they know, shush, mom's busy. Which as
Wow.
adults, I'm sure they're like, really, mom? Like,
It's your
why are you still
shorthand.
using that?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your family
And
shorthand.
they're great kids and it really helped, but it still was taking the firm that I had built to bring in that time. So I was able to volunteer for my all three of my kids for like every Friday or every other Friday, half a day. I built in that time, and really it helped me design the firm that I now have, that gives that flexibility to my employees, and gives them the opportunity to, their life's not this job, it's a job. I mean, they're amazing at the job. We try to make it a great culture, but really, we want them to have life. And that's why we have put the culture together we have based on what I went through as a mom and a single mom with 3 kids.
Did you ever want to quit?
Oh
I
gosh,
mean,
absolutely.
because when you're on your own, you have to pay for insurance for you and your 3 kids. That's really, really expensive for people who don't know that, who work at corporate America. Um, I mean, I think that's what did you do when you had those hard times?
Yeah, and the Great Recession was horrible for me.
Oh my
We had
gosh.
clients since I had started. I had clients that were at an age where they were 5 years from retirement or things like that, and it was advising them to close their business because it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
That they were working so hard and things didn't look good, or what they thought they could sell the business for had evaporated. So I had to let go 2 employees and, on my own. And there were horrible times where I took jobs just for grocery money to make sure that my, boys, because my daughter at that time was in college, were going to be okay. And I had a second job selling, tutoring. Like I just did what I had to, which is I think what so many single moms need to do. But then really looked at that when probably about 8.5, 9 years ago, when I had mentally gotten through the Great Recession and thought, well, I could go get a job. But after being self-employed for almost 31 years, back then, -8, it was like, well, what kind of job could I do and handle? And I realized that's not really a great option. I've been on my own too long. And so that's when I decided to grow the firm and, really put time and effort to get it to where we are now, size-wise.
Gosh, you deserve all the success that you've had. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Well, that's just a long journey that I know that other women go through, but it's always, I mean, I think a lot of, I started my own business the same reason because of the flexibility and control it allows us to have over our schedule and
mhm.
our time with our kids. And we're lucky to have people like you who create that atmosphere for your employees because most firms don't. No matter what they say, they really don't give that employee flexibility that we as moms or as parents crave, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think things have come a long ways. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see that, paternity leave is becoming
Mm-hmm.
more and more common, and that people really do take into consideration, giving people more flexibility, less hours. But it's still, especially in the accounting world, it's still an issue, which is why we're finding that people aren't going to school to be
Right.
accountants. Or if they go into accounting, they don't stay in accounting because it's just brutal. So I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in this profession to make it more friendly for women, make it more friendly for just anyone who wants to have a life outside their business. And
Yeah.
I
I've got,
also, oh, go ahead, sorry.
oh, no, you go ahead.
And I also just think it's interesting how I will still have, as the founder and CEO of Minerva Group, I've got an amazing COO. And even though I meet with almost every one of our clients to see if they're a good fit for us, I will still have client conversations and they'll say, gosh, can you run that by Joseph? Thinking that he is the boss. And or will refer to all the women that work for me as bookkeepers and the men as accountants. So there is still this underlying gender bias, even in today's times, that was way more prevalent 30 years ago, but it's still there and, still needs to be worked on.
Yeah. I mean, it comes up in our industry too, where somebody asked a client, oh, so you have a finance guy too? And she said, no, I have a finance gal, which I was like, hooray, good for you. Um, so you decided to start your business because you were ready to grow, you were ready to build something.
Yeah, I really felt like I had been, working this job and this profession, really to support my kids and to give me that flexibility I needed to you know, raise them. But then it became okay, like Actually, I had a client, one of my very first clients, when my daughter was a baby, and the husband was, a business manager for um, a big, large company that's well known in Denver. And one of the first things Larry said to me, and remember, I was like 24 years old, he said, "Well, what is your exit plan?" And I said, "Gosh, I don't know. Like, I just started this business." And he said, "Get a job if you don't have an exit plan, because a job is going to be a lot easier than the journey you're on. So make sure you figure out what your end game is. Otherwise, don't bother doing this." And that really stuck with me. And I realized, that 8, 9 years ago, that my exit plan wasn't going to happen if I didn't start getting really aggressive in growing the business, or again, that I should go get a job.
What skills do you feel like you need to be a successful entrepreneur? I mean, you and I have talked about it. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I didn't think of an exit strategy. At the time, it was more of, I really want to help women. I really love financial planning, and I need flexibility for my kids. There was no exit plan, like,
Mhm.
and no sales training, marketing ability. Like, what skills do you feel like you needed to build this successful business? And what, I mean, I'm sure you had a lot of them already, but what kind of education or help did you get to help you be the successful and have this, company with what, 10 employees now?
I believe we're at 17 or 18 now.
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. Okay.
Yeah, we grow about 30 to 40% a year historically since we decided to
Woo!
start growing. So
Yeah.
we're pretty aggressive with our growth, but I think that is a testament to our culture for employees and just how we have relationships with our clients. Um, and now, of course, I cannot remember your question, Betty, because
Oh,
I've
just
gone somewhere
what,
else.
yeah. What skills do you feel
Oh, yes.
is important for entrepreneurs to have? Either people who are women who are thinking about starting their own business. Again, as somebody I call myself a reluctant entrepreneur. What should women be thinking about? Or what skills, if they don't have them now, should they go get or
Yeah.
seek help for?
Well, and I think a lot of things we're born with, and recognizing what we do have as gifts that are existing. So for me, I've always been loving meeting new people and just developing relationships, that type of thing. So I think that knowing what you have and what you're missing is super important. I also used to think, oh, self-help books, business books, how gross. Like, why would you do this? Why would you spend your free time, you know, learning about things that somebody else is just telling you that may or may not even be accurate? And now I'm reading business books for the last umpteen years on a regular basis to figure out those skills. And, you know, as you're scaling a business, especially figuring out, understanding what you're missing and how to fill those. So even when you're small and you're not adding employees, but you're adding consultants or people that can assist you in different ways. I'm not a marketing person. That is not my skill set. I'm a great networker. I'm a great relationship builder, but to do true marketing, I kind of glaze over and don't, jump into whatsoever. So I think acknowledging that and realizing that I was never going to learn how to be a good marketer because it just can't keep my attention. So anytime we've looked at marketing, it has always been a member of my staff as we grew, or looking at consultants or marketing firms to assist, because I knew that was not my skill set. So I think, being curious is hugely important. um, Wanting to, sometimes I feel like people are like, okay, this is the nuts and bolts, and they just pay attention to the structure, but they don't pay attention to the soft skills that they're bringing or need to bring into a business. And so the passion will get you really far, but if you don't have someone, if these aren't your skill sets and you don't have someone help with the finances, you don't have someone help with marketing, those items that are just a waste of your time, basically. I had a gal tell me one time years ago that you shouldn't be doing anything if you don't love it, and that your hourly rate is more than. So if you are not into bookkeeping, and you're a consultant making $225 an hour, do not do the bookkeeping. That's costing you, so much less than that. Same with cleaning your house, doing grocery shopping. If you love it and that's soothing to you or whatever that is, that's great. But don't force yourself into doing everything, because that's part of the thing you have to give up as an entrepreneur is doing everything. And DIY is not the best way to be building a business.
Words to my ears. Yes. How did you let go of that control? Um, Especially
Yeah,
when you're building from your bootstraps. Of course, you're like, well, I can't afford a bookkeeper at this point. I can't afford this, which is fair. But when you get to the point where you that's no longer as much of an issue, um, some parts of it is this has been my baby, this is my control. Like
I,
how were you able to let go of some of those pieces, or was it easy for you? Maybe it was you're more of a delegator than some people.
yeah. Well, I think it was, really listening to people talk about their own struggles with bookkeeping, for example, because that was what we do. When people would say, gosh, I'm doing bookkeeping like 8 hours a day, and that's keeping me from doing, 8 hours a week, sorry. And that's keeping me behind on
Yeah.
estimating, or it's keeping me behind on whatever their, main tasks were. And it was like, oh, what am I doing that is that same way? And then I've had clients that have come to me that are doing multi-million dollar companies. And they're like, well, we didn't think we could afford an accountant. And then we dive in and we're like, you like have wasted so much money by not getting an accountant when you should have, which we like to get in, pretty much in the front end, even if we're just assisting a little bit here and there, because we can help people with major pitfalls, and bring our network of people to them. But yeah, this one client literally was paying the IRS $10,000 a month and had no idea what that money was for. And then we found out that they just hadn't done their payroll reporting. And once we did it, they got a refund because they've been doing that for 2 years, thinking they couldn't afford an accountant. So a lot of those big mistakes, can happen by not getting the right people in your team early.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest issue, is that people think they can't afford anyone, but there are people that are in almost every price range. And for us, a small business that's just starting with that needs a bookkeeper, we probably are not that fit, because of how we've structured our business. But there's always people that do that, and that's what they love to do. You're the perfect size client, and their prices are reasonable, and it makes sense to get that team put together as fast as you can, even if you outgrow them at some point.
Yeah. Speaking of, I read a lot of business books too. Do you have any recommendations for listeners and for
Oh
me?
my gosh, there
Or
is a book.
favorites? How about favorites?
Yeah, there is a book called Real Self Care, and that it's not about bubble baths. And I apologize that I could have the name slightly wrong.
That's,
Um,
I'll
but
take
it
the,
really is about boundaries, for women, especially, on how to, with their life and business and personal, how to put good boundaries and put yourself first. Because I think, especially when you are, a mom, especially a single mom, you're not putting yourself first on a regular basis. And you do think taking a bubble bath is self care. And that's not, as the book says, real self care. It's about putting boundaries and putting yourself first at times, and, really changing the lens that you're looking at yourself through, which I think is hard to do when you're so, busy.
yeah, no, I'll definitely take a look at that. So I promised tax tips, and because you do tax, in addition to the work you do for corporations and businesses,
Mhm.
you also do personal income tax preparation. Um,
Yes.
are there common tax deductions that people overlook that people should know about?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, years ago, deducting a home office was, shied away from, because people had heard that the IRS audits that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a red flag. And to that, I say it's a real deduction. If you choose not to take that because you're afraid that it's going to cause an IRS audit. If you're taking it correctly, there that should not be consideration. You could be walking away from hundreds and thousands of dollars over the lifetime of your business because of a fear for an audit, which, we don't see that happening. And I know that the IRS has additional funding and can look at those things, but I think that people now really understand home offices and are taking the expenses correctly. Software has made a big difference in making that an easier deduction for people to do. So don't be shied away from a deduction just because you heard that it could be a red flag, like auto mileage, and some things like that. If you're a solopreneur or a single member LLC, you should take what you have. Just make sure you've got the good records to support it. But there's no need to leave money, handed over to the IRS just because of a fear that you're going to be audited. That just doesn't happen that often. One of the things that we see a lot of, which is, heartbreaking to be the messenger on, is that people have rental properties. And we especially get people coming to us when they sell the rental properties, but they've been, doing their taxes on their own for all these years. And they decided not to take depreciation because they felt like, that was risky or it was above, their knowledge base. But what happens is when you sell that rental property, that depreciation is recaptured and comes back at you as income. And it doesn't matter if you didn't take it. So the IRS, they're not giving you a break because you chose not to take that deduction. That deduction still has to be recorded as if you had taken it. We can only go back 3 years. And so then all of a sudden you get a tax bill for something you didn't actually take as a tax deduction. So people can be
That seems
heartbroken when they find
almost
out.
unfair, right?
Well, from the
Well, they're
IRS
kind of they're
standpoint,
kind of double taxed in a sense.
yeah, because they didn't take the deduction that the IRS says you have to. So
Oh, that's
it's,
interesting.
yeah, so that's one of the harder things to tell people, especially when they've had a property for, decades, that we're recapturing depreciation that they never recorded and took as a deduction. So that one's very painful.
Could you explain that a little bit more in layman's terms for folks who don't understand what depreciation is? Um,
Yeah, absolutely. So when you buy a property that is a rental property or a business property, but I'm going to use rental because that goes under your personal taxes and it's easier to understand. You are going to depreciate the value of the business minus the land. The land doesn't depreciate, but you take that over so many years, 27 and a half is the typical. So you take a piece of that. So that percentage, 1/27th and a half per year for the 27 and a half years in this example. So if you had a property that was valued at $100,000, you would be slowly depreciating that over each year. To the point where then that is fully depreciated after, like I said, if the life is 27 and a half years, over 27 and a half years. So let's say you bought the property for 100,000, you kept it for 30 years, you didn't take that depreciation because you didn't understand that. You go to sell the property, not only will you have the gain, but you also would have that $100,000 worth of depreciation that should have been taken added to the gain that you already had in the appreciation of the building. So in
wow.
today's world, if you would have sold that building for $1 million that you paid 100,000 for, you cannot take that. Um, you cannot take the depreciation at that time. So instead, that $100,000 gets added in as if you had already taken it. So it just adds another $100,000 to your gain and your taxable income. So it can be a really painful lesson to learn.
Yeah. Well, are there other tax myths that you see come up often?
I think people have gotten a little confused. Like back in the day, we had unreimbursed business expenses, and the IRS is, that has been taken off as a deduction. So people have kind of gotten shied away from everything on your Schedule A. So charitable giving, is an example, medical expenses, which are limited. But a lot of times when you factor in what your health insurance out of pocket costs are, deductibles, all those things. You don't always need a big medical year to qualify, depending on your income level. So a lot of times when we see people that are, that state that they had medical expenses, but they think they're just talking about out of pocket, not the health insurance piece of that. They can choose not to even give us those figures, and could be missing out on those deductions. Um, Again, charitable giving, a lot of people don't understand how cash versus donating a property, whether it's thrift store value or artwork, stock, all those type of things that come up. uh, you know, you should run it by your tax person, because you don't want to leave those deductions not taken. It can make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars with things that you just don't realize could have such an impact.
And how are you preparing your personal clients for the possible sunset of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Yeah, I mean,
Because I
it's,
mean that's the larger standard deduction. I think had people moving, most people, which was the intent of it, right?
yeah,
Was most people moving away from that. Don't worry, I have a dog too.
yeah, I know.
Always the worst.
I think UPS is at the door or
Yay!
walking to the
Oh,
door, which always is, this is the greeting that UPS gets
oh. Do
with
you have to go get it?
every. No, 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 no.
Okay.
And
I was like,
he'll be
are you
leaving.
getting something fun?
I know, I wish.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he's not moving very fast. So apologize for the barking in the background. Yeah, especially our businesses that are S corps, they've been used to some credits that are saving them quite a bit on taxes, but generally everyone is affected by this. And of course, we don't know what that is going to look like in the future either. So it's not that we have a solution for everything,
Right.
because some of these things are still up in the air. And the last, gosh, handful of years, we've had changes even happening in the beginning of the year where we can't do anything proactively because the year's already over or about to be over. So, we are pushing tax planning more than usual to make sure that people really understand what's coming up and what could happen, so that we can make really educated decisions at the end of the year. This is the perfect time to have those conversations, to see if there's anything that maybe should be considered. And then next year, of course, we'll be hitting it again really hard, because it's hard to keep up on all these tax
Yes.
changes. And it's overwhelming even for us, because they've got different names and different acronyms, and we're like, what is that one again, and what does that have to do with this or that? So it's a really daunting task for any of us to try on our own to keep up on all these tax changes. And software is super helpful. Like, that definitely helps walk you through it, but that's just the tax preparation. That doesn't help you with making decisions that can help you saving taxes. And there's definitely conversations to be had about when should you sell certain things, or liquidate, or get into retirement, or all of these things based on taxes, that could radically change over the next couple of years. And so getting that advice, really is worth the money. We see that our fees for someone going through tax planning are paid for many times over by making better decisions from a tax perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but we're coming across from my side of the street a lot of CPAs, a lot of accounting firms moving away from the tax planning because they are so darn busy, right?
Hmm. Yes.
And we're also in our industry noticing, my firm does a lot of tax planning, and more financial advisors are doing it because investments and tax planning and your whole financial ecosystem, right? They
Hmm.
all touch each other, and it's really important for them to touch. So I think your firm is maybe not rare, but stands out because you do tax planning. Because some firms just want to do your taxes; that's all they have time
Hmm.
for. As you were saying, there are not many accountants or wannabe accountants coming up. So what we're seeing is that a lot of the older firms aren't taking new clients, and don't have time to do tax planning for their current clients. Not to say that they're not helpful, it's just they're busy, right?
Yeah, they are busy. And I will tell you, after being in this industry for, 35 years, that being the messenger and saying, "Oh, yeah, here's your tax return, and I'm sorry, but you owe 50,000, and it's too bad we didn't talk this fall because we would have had you do this, that, or the other that would have saved you half of that." Um, and I don't really put it out like that because that's
Yes.
pretty brutal, but that's what's going on in my head when I'm the messenger for that. So, we're not a churn and burn firm. So we're not one of those firms that is the volume. Can we do 700 tax returns in a year? Sure, we could, but that's not going to give the outcome to our clients. And that's not really our philosophy. We want that relationship. We want to know what's going on in people's lives. We want to provide that extra, be that resource for them from a tax perspective. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the firms that are wanting to do that high volume. That works really well for them. It's just not a great fit for us.
Yeah. And so we're basically saying most people, I would say the majority of people, do need tax guidance.
Yeah.
And we're also saying that it's hard to find
Yes.
accountants to help them. I mean, what are your, I mean, first of all, who's a good fit for your firm as a, private client?
Yeah. I think that, we obviously, because we spend a little more time, we're relational, and we want you to, pick up the phone and tell us when you have a life event that is happening, like you've lost a family member, you're coming into an inheritance, all of those things. We want to be on top of that and help you get through that from a tax perspective. So for us, people that really just want to pay the fee, get the taxes and walk away, that's not a great fit for us. We really like the people that appreciate having someone that will be responsive to them, and that they can ask the questions throughout the year too. Um, so that being proactive and appreciating that. And like I said, we're not the right fit for everyone. But if you are that kind of person, we do a lot of work with women. Um, the majority of our staff is women, and not that you can't support women in a great way. But I think when you have been a single mom, it's a lot easier to understand and explain to someone, what an earned income credit is and how they can utilize that on their own taxes, how they qualify for head of household, the things that are a little nuanced and sometimes really overwhelming for women to try to understand. So we're really great at taking the time to explain that. And we try not to use what we call accountantese.
Yeah,
Sometimes it gets a little hard, but
right.
we try to be, very,
When we go on the depreciation discussion, right? But these are the words we've been given.
exactly. And it is just like every industry has its
Right.
own,
Jargon.
vocabulary.
Right.
Obviously accounting does, but, we'll approach it from different aspects. Some people need the visual explanation. We'll take that time to make it so that it's easier for people to understand. And then with businesses, again, we do a lot of creatives, a lot of women owned, but we're also very proactive with them in trying to help them make good financial decisions. And, one of the other things that I think has come up a lot, and it's going to come up by the IRS, is they're looking at reasonable compensation for S Corps and C Corps. And, that's a big issue where people have that the guidance on that has changed a lot. But it can really cause a lot of problems for people. And the IRS has said they're going to start looking at that and auditing, and they're even making us as a firm responsible for reasonable comp. So as the IRS is getting more funding, I think the need is going to become greater and greater for people to be more proactive with their taxes.
And if Minerva is not the right fit for them, how do you recommend women find an accountant that might work for them, or what accreditations are there? I mean, all of us know CPA, but there's also the
Yeah.
EA, which maybe you can explain what all the different accreditations are and what's important if you want to have good advice.
Yeah. And I think that that we've also grown as an industry that
Mm-hmm.
credentials aren't as important as they used to be because we have found that experience, and we have found that just the changing of the landscape have made that change slightly. I mean, a CPA is more of a generalist. I mean, they're definitely, it's a really difficult test. They've got ethics. They've got, to understand financial statements, auditing, tax. Like they really have the whole shebang as far as, that certification. Um, we have an EA on staff who's amazing. An EA is an enrolled agent. They are only focused on tax. So the perspective of an EA, typically they're less of a generalist and they have dove into specific things within taxes, and they can represent you. Our EA can go and help you with those tax remediation conversations. So if you have a overdue, haven't filed taxes, one of those situations, which there's no judgment
Yeah,
on. Everyone has
right. It
life,
happens.
lifey,
Yeah.
and it happens. And so getting someone who is really skilled and knowledgeable and certified to do that is really an amazing thing because we can help a lot with, you know, the IRS tries to scare us with big numbers. So you're like, oh, wait, I owe 10,000. Wait, how did it become 40? Because of penalties and interest, and they're trying to get you to move and do something. And so getting a professional that can help you walk through that is also super helpful. You can get into all kinds of credentials. There's CFEs, which are certified fraud examiners that really work on, looking and forensically going into someone's financials to find things. Um, there's CFA, Certified Financial Analysis, and I can go on and on and on. So the
So,
credentials really help you find those specialties and a new knowledge base that will help you in a specific situations.
so if they're looking at different firms or even smaller accounting firms, you wouldn't say they have to have a CPA or an EA on staff, or they could, if as long as they've been a reputable business, or how can they feel comfortable saying, okay, those are the things, those initials hold my hand, that these people are somebody's vet, these tests have at least vetted them.
Yeah, no,
Right.
absolutely,
So if you're going in
absolutely.
blind, what would you say? I mean, obviously your gut, I feel like we have good
Oh,
spidey senses, but is there anything that you would look for other than maybe, as you were saying, 5 years of being in business, 2 years, or what would you recommend?
yeah, because I also think that, we have hired people who have great credentials who have not been great tax preparers or
Sure.
accountants.
Right.
So
And
the
then,
credentials aren't everything for
right. And
sure.
we see that, yeah, across industries for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's, yes, you have something behind your name that's
Right.
great, but
You're
that's,
smart enough to pass a test. Awesome.
yes, yes, you're a great student. You're a
Yes.
great test taker, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that you're great at that industry.
Mm-hmm.
So experience is huge. I think one of the benefits as we have grown is getting that breadth of knowledge and expertise where we have people that have come from corporate, come from different industries. They've got more of a breadth of experience working hands on in different industries or have seen and experienced different things that gives them that additional experience. I think it's tough. I mean, when I started, obviously I was very green. And I think it's tough to, trust that someone has enough years of experience to be able to have that breadth of knowledge because you can learn a lot of things in a book, but until you're out and living it and seeing those different,
Quirks.
yes, it makes it really tough to do that. So I think a lot of times accountants go and work for the big firms to get that under their belt before they go out on their own. And that's, valuable time for them to be mentored and to get some real life experience. So I think those are the things that I look for the most. And obviously, personality and having a fit where you feel comfortable with someone, my
Right.
gosh, that's going to trump a lot of that because
It's
if
your
you don't
money.
feel like you can come and talk to that person openly, because money's intimate. So
Yes.
whether it's in your field or my field, people disclosing their money and what they've done with it and the mistakes, we've all made mistakes with money, and having to be open with that is terrifying. And if you feel like someone is not hearing you, doesn't, it's not a good personality click, it's going to just take that to the next level of, not getting what you need from those services.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Um, what other advice do you have for especially women who are looking to go into retirement when it comes to their taxes? What should they be thinking about from a tax perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the bigger things is, getting with someone like Betty and her firm, and working in tangent together. We share some clients,
Yeah.
which I think is hugely beneficial, because you have a certain amount of information that the client doesn't always think to give us. And for us, we can ask some great questions about like what things could be converted to a Roth, when they're thinking about retirement. Some selling some appreciated investments or depreciated investments, that take advantage of where they are right now from a tax perspective that may go away during retirement or radically change during retirement. So, those type of conversations about things that we can strategically look at that will take advantage of an existing tax bracket or one that's going to happen when you retire, is such a pivotal time to have those conversations, because we can't do it once you've done it. Once you've moved out of that tax bracket and
Yes,
retired,
it's tough.
just
It
yeah,
makes me sad when I've had clients who come to me after, where there's things that could have been done. I mean, it is what it is, and we move on from there. But it is true that earlier, if we can have these conversations before they retire, or before they downshift from their career, then we can be much more proactive
mhm.
and save the money, and
Yeah,
sometimes a lot of money. Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, a ton of
A lot
money,
of money. Yeah. Yeah.
and especially if you're selling a business,
Yeah.
we always tell people, if you think you're 5 years out, you better start right now. It's 3 to 5 years out to really make sure that we can work with someone like Betty. We can, really understand what your goals are after selling the business so that we can really set up the tax situation to be the best it can. Because a lot of times people are looking at huge sums of money. They've worked their whole lives for an amazing business. They finally get the payout, but the last thing you want to do is hand the IRS, just a sure percentage off the top when
Right.
there's so many things we can do to protect that. And you know, that just brings joy to me to, we
Yes.
want to give the IRS what they deserve and what
Right.
they need, not what they need. That's a bad word.
Yeah.
But
What,
we
yeah,
don't,
what we owe. We're happy.
what we,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, we want to get to that line and get it down as far as we can, without crossing any lines or making anyone uncomfortable. But to just pay off the top and see all that money go when we could have saved it, oh, it's horrible.
Yes. Well, I tell clients, think of especially with their retirement accounts, and think of the IRS, think of the government as your business partner, right?
Hmm.
And they're going to get their cut. And we're fine with paying what their cut is, but we don't want to pay a tip, right? We don't want
Yeah,
to overpay if we don't have to, right? If there's ways that we can mitigate that. Of
and
course,
that is a great
within
way
the
to say
bounds
that.
of the law, right?
Yeah,
We're
no,
not
that's
doing
a
anything sketchy. It's more that there's so many different pieces of tax that, like you said, it's so intimidating that people just don't know about.
Yeah, if you're selling a big piece of property and
Hmm.
haven't looked at a 1031 exchange, because you're gonna down the road you want to do that, well, it's very limited on time. So a lot of people kind of are all in the glow of selling and getting this amount of money, and they're like, oh, in the next 2 years I'm going to find something
Right.
else. Well, we really need to talk about it way before then.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you got to find a
To
property to buy pretty quick.
Yes, yeah, you're very limited on that time frame. So, just starting those conversations, getting your team together. I think that is probably one of the most important aspects that you're going through major life changes is finding your team of people that you may not be talking to but once a year but knowing them and being comfortable with them, getting a base relationship started so that when you come up to these events, you are really knowing that team is behind you, you have confidence in them, you know how they're going to work together, is so beneficial rather than at the last minute asking every friend and family member that hey, do you know somebody that, can help me with this life event? And these are all the specialists I need. It's not going to be your
Right.
team then.
Well, and especially in your industry where your your industry's stretched, right? There's
Yes.
so last
Very
minute
stressful.
is first it's stressful for the person looking for somebody, but they might not find the best right fit if they're in a time crunch because it also depends on what the accountants are looking at
Mhm.
and what their workflow is like. So um, yes, especially for that piece of it, I really think you're right. Building a
Yeah.
base is great. And so then you're dialed in and you're ready to go.
Well, and I probably know more firms that aren't taking new clients than firms that are.
Yeah, I would say that's my experience too.
Hmm.
So, well, I guess we're scaring people into going to find an accountant. um, so I like to also, since this is a podcast for women, over the age of 45 or what have you, um, and we're all very busy with family and life and work. How do you keep yourself centered when you're building and growing? I mean, it's super successful now, but you're continuing to grow. That takes a lot of time and stress, and you have a family and a personal life. How do you keep yourself centered amongst all this stuff?
Yeah, the stuff.
Good stuff,
Um,
but there's also,
y-
as you said, with the real self care. I mean, how do you protect yourself, maybe with boundaries, or how do you center yourself? Because it's hard.
yeah. Well, and I think it's also interesting as we get to this age too that, our children are getting older, they're not
Hmm.
dependent on us. Like there's a lot of things
Hmm.
changing in our identity.
Yeah,
And so, there is kind of a need to not reinvent ourselves, but part of our lives need to be, tweaked a little
yeah,
bit. I found myself, developing friendships through people that I've met professionally that are women of, similar age and experiences. Where before that, it was a lot of like my kids, you know, parents and things like that. So I think um, the pool of people that I choose to spend time with have become more and more like me, which has been really helpful too. Because I think when you aren't an entrepreneur, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
right.
good for you finding a
Yeah,
job that works.
absolutely. Amen.
Yeah. But
It's
I
not an
think
easy game.
no, it's not an easy gag, but I think surrounding yourself with more women who are entrepreneurs as we get older, it's been really helpful for me to stay centered and have someone who I can say, gosh, this part of my business right now is a huge struggle and I'm, kind of falling apart about it. They understand what that means.
Yeah,
Um, God love my friends that aren't entrepreneurs who I also kudos to. But when I say that to them, they're like, oh, okay, so you're complaining about, I don't even know what that means,
yeah,
or I cannot relate.
yes,
Um, so I think that has been something that has happened probably in the last 10 years that has made a huge difference in how I can, really keep centered is because I have a group of friends that are, you know, more in the same world I'm in.
yeah,
And that's been helpful. And then, just like that book, having books that really remind you about keeping your boundaries, because that to me is given me permission to not be so much of a people pleaser and to say no more and, just put myself first a little bit more than I was before. And, that's just leading to a better, quieter, more centered life.
Yeah, I'm going to buy that book after we get off this call.
Yes, yeah, I recommend it. It's been great.
And then also, yeah, I work with women who are thinking about retirement, in retirement, and studies show that people who have passions or hobbies going into retirement are much more content and confident in retirement. And you ask somebody who works a lot or who just has kids and haven't had time to focus on what they love. I'm in the search for ideas, and maybe it'll help others. So, do you have passions or hobbies that you love, uh, that you know might might spark somebody else's interest?
Yeah, I found the kayaking for me was absolutely an amazing experience because I could go and paddle, 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 wear myself out, but then I could just lay there on the kayak, feeling the waves from the lake, just moving me up and down, sitting in the sun and outside, breathing the air. So it really gave me that exercise and that, wearing myself out, but then just gave me that peace to just sit in the quiet in nature, with a little movement going. And so that became something I was not expecting when I took up kayaking. I used to be just a reader, voracious reader. And then with kids and business and all of that, kind of lost track of it. So, I've been really looking at things that used to give me a lot of pleasure. I used to do some needlework and things like that as well, before having kids and when I just had my daughter. And so have really kind of started reinvestigating the things that I used to love. And then, just being open to trying new things too. Because I think that's the amazing part as
Yes.
we expand our network and our friends and get to this new place in life is that I barely ever say no when someone brings me an idea that normally I'd be like, oh, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, wait, wait, wait. I haven't done that. I'm going
Right.
to just do it. Like,
Yeah.
just make the
Try everything
time.
once, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yes. And then you never know. You never know what you'll like.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for spending your time today here with me, and the listeners. Do you have anything else that you want to share that we haven't covered that maybe women haven't thought about, or from an entrepreneur standpoint?
Oh,
Last words
gosh.
of wisdom.
Nothing is coming to mind other than I know a lot of people out there, if you've been an entrepreneur once, you can easily fall into becoming a serial entrepreneur. And which is my case. I have two other businesses that are happening concurrently with my accounting business. And so I think that, sometimes we think there's something wrong with us when we have that bug that we just can't let go of. But I think the most important thing with that too is that's your passion. What is your mission and owning that and then to just keep in mind to take care of yourself and to still have an exit plan. Because for a long time, I thought I'll never retire. And, sometimes we don't have control over that. So you've got to be working on that too.
Yeah. Well, actually, studies show that most of us don't get to decide
Mhm.
when we retire. It's decided for us for one reason or another. Um, okay, that was dark. I might cut that. But thank you again for all of your time.
Well, thank you for having me, Betty. You're one of my favorite people
I love
on
you
the planet.
too.
And
Yes.
so I am so happy to have been honored by the request to join your podcast. Thank you.